As we were saying, my name is Drew Leda. I'm running for House District 31. I was originally born in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, grew up in Evergreen until I was about 4, at which point we moved to northeastern Ohio, where I got to experience a really interesting upbringing from a political standpoint. We have Rust Belt pro-union Republicans out there, and we have Bible Belt gun-toting Democrats. So in a lot of ways, a lot of what we'll consider the modern political stereotypes as they exist today were completely foreign to me growing up. I'm not used to those type of lines. After that, I went into the United States Navy, 1992, for it was during the cleanup of Desert Storm and during the Balkans. And after that, I went out and decided that I was, going to stay working on the water, and I entered a commercial diving apprenticeship in 1996. Worked my way up through the ranks. They have they being an apprenticeship, kind of the undercards, like the pre-journeyman is known as a tender. You have 3 grades of that where you learn how to operate the equipment. Just work my way up through the 3 other ranks of diver. Basically, you start out burying a piece of pipe between your legs in ankle deep water, all the way down to, as a diver 1, doing saturation diving at 880-foot storage in a life support system second only to that, to the space shuttle and the International Space Station in complexity and tolerance. Moved up through supervisor, superintendent, and then through a rather cruel trick where I was supposed to be covering from one of the project managers who was going to be going on a 2-week vacation. Old boy was retiring. I never got to see the field again. They kept me latched on with the promise that I'd get to learn more about, all the governing bodies and the things we have to interface with and management of these projects, and I wouldn't have to wear a tie. 2 years later, they promoted me to their lead project planner of the largest subsea and marine contractor in the United States at the time, Global Industries, where they told me I had to wear a tie, but I had become so addicted to the process and the information of how these projects are run, especially after Katrina and Rita, where we were put in charge of one of the largest emergency responses in our country's history. Actually, rather unprepared to do so, but I actually had the pleasure of briefing the National Security Advisor, because when Katrina and Rita hit, most of the Gulf of Mexico was shut down. There's a great deal of pollution happening, and we needed to figure out what we needed to do to get a hold of it. So Global Industries at the time had a lot of international assets operating over in like the South China Sea, Brazil, west coast of Africa. So basically, through interface with our public body, we ended up getting provisions of the Jones Act temporarily suspended so we could get some of our foreign flagged assets into the Gulf of Mexico and handle that. As you all remember, there was nothing quite like that disaster that's happened before or since. And
so were you basically then shutting down wells or capping wells, or what was the work that Global was doing there?
Well, shoot, everything from most of the BPRs and things like that they have largely prevented large amounts of oil being put out. Most of the work centered around hurricane response, the beginning of which was establishing the actual state of the Gulf of Mexico. You can do flyovers with helicopters, but 100-foot waves traveling at 50 miles an hour tend to erase everything above the waterline, so you're basically just guessing. So the first priority was getting actual assets to drag magnetometers, do subsea surveys of the area, and find out the condition of a lot of the underwater infrastructure. In a lot of those instances, the top ends had been shorn, and you can largely go in there, retop the platform, tie back into the existing riser structure. And other times, what we had to do was a lot more in depth than that. Part of our efforts involved stuff that you just don't think of, like what do you do when a 240-foot long by 80-foot wide barge is washed 15 miles inland and ends up in a field miles away from the closest body of water?
You were doing Mississippi River cleanup to get rid of the barge congestion, all the sunken barges as well?
Everything that had to do with putting the Gulf of Mexico back in order. From consulting on shoreline remediation, bulkhead and bridge repairs, yeah, it was definitely an interesting, hectic couple of weeks. I don't think I got more than 80 hours of sleep over the 3-4 months we were dealing with that, because there was always a phone call dealing with something. Because as you all know, our offshore oil and gas, although a outmodable commodity, is definitely essential to the national security and the entire economy of the United States. So it was a sleepless task getting that all put back together. And it's just at the time, it was a series of Tuesdays and Thursdays. Interestingly enough, it didn't seem, because you're so in the middle of it, you're not fully aware of the 50,000-foot view of what you're doing and all the entities and agencies and corporations and workers responsible for making all that happen.
So how did you get to Oregon?
Well, I used to live in Portland, Texas, which is the town directly north of Corpus Christi. Well, I loved living in the Texas Gulf Coast because palm trees and beaches and the Jimmy Buffett lifestyle is very appealing to me. Where I grew up in Colorado and in Ohio, I'm used to hills and dales and rivers and streams and seasons. So basically, my wife and I figured we'd do exhaustive research on what area best fit our lifestyle proclivities, how we wanted to move forward, just kind of the general culture of the area. And we settled on buying an 85-foot motor sailor out on the Multnomah Channel, where I get to fish salmon and steelhead runs off of the back of my boat and walk to where I hunt elk with a bow. A pretty strange thing for a guy who carries a Portland address to get to claim to do. So in a lot of ways, I am that synthesis between Portland's metropolitan area and the remainder of House District 31 that is markedly rural after redistricting.
So do you move that vessel? That's a big vessel for the Multnomah Channel.
That is a big boat for the Multnomah Channel. For the most part, it functions as more or less a floating home. When it comes time to going out and playing on the river, great deal of our friends have, we'll just say, a whole lot more convenient and interesting ways of playing on the river. So we're the spot where if you want a view for Christmas ships or stuff like that. We were for a while considering pulling and moving up closer to the coast, but didn't want to sacrifice the accessibility to the I-5 corridor, the conveniences that come to living in Portland, because Wonderfully Weird was just fine with us.
So I don't want to belabor this point, but I like to canoe in the channel there, and so I know there's some junk boats. There are junk boats everywhere, but how do you deal with? Are you connected to one of the marinas, or how do you deal with? So you don't have to store your gray water, for instance. You can take it right off the vessel into a pipe.
Yeah, we've been moored at the same marina since 2005. A lot of folks wonder kind of that disambiguation between, like you were talking about, derelict vessels that are out hanging off the hook in the Multnomah Channel versus those that pay sizable slip fees that contribute to massive property taxes that these marinas spend out here, due to the assessed value of the properties, and typically the improvements to the properties that a lot of these marinas have to self-provide. I know our marina, Sigler's Cove Marina, we have our own water and sewage treatment plant, and we furnish water and sewage treatment for 3 of the other marinas out here. So in a way, we're our own public utility district, and we do so just fine, staying in compliance with the state and county governments without any assistance from them. So in a lot of ways, living out here, it's just beautiful. I can't think of a more beautiful environment to to live where we raised our kids, where they graduated from Scappoose High School. They got to appreciate living 15 minutes out of a metropolitan area, the largest city in our state, while at the same time being perfectly plugged into the woodlands, wildlands, and farm communities that really define 85% of our state from a geographic standpoint.
So what compelled you to run for this office?
Well, being somewhat of a classicalist, I always believed that the key responsibilities of government was to protect the lives, the rights, the life, the liberty, the prosperity, and the property of the people. And largely outside of that, allowing legislation to manifest at the most local level possible to keep it by and for the affected, to less obscure consent of the governed through the application of cross-border and cross-cultural lines. I'm a bit of a localist as that goes. If I'm left to err on one slippery slope or the other, because centralization and localization both represent slippery slopes when you look at them from a projection standpoint. And I noticed a lot of agenda pushing from both sides, allegiance to agendas other than protecting the rights, life, liberty, property, and prosperity of the people that was done in, the House of Representatives and politics more in general. Let's just be honest, it's become largely an economic interest, and left to choose between one-stop shopping for lobbyists who just have to show up to one marble building in Salem to petition making their racket permanent. Usually we've had enough of private gains and socialized losses. And I have not noticed our representatives protecting their people. They have not been acting as agents of their people. And that's what I understand the job to be. That's how I've been running my campaign and how I intend to operate as a representative. I'm an advocate for the living souls in my district, and their rights in perpetuity. I will not compromise on certain issues.
Is there a particular case or news story that kind of galled you in that regard, where you saw representatives not, we're looking out for their own interests and the interests of, say, the cartel rather than the people?
Okay. I believe there's plenty of instances of those to go around, but I can definitely say where I primarily became activated and we'll just say vocal. I used to do all of my stuff from a policy analyst standpoint. I'm the guy that could read through 1,200 pages of document, boil it down to some points or find the pit traps in it. I had really limited interest in being the loudmouth responsible for not only bringing that news to bear on the public, but then trying to stir public action towards protection of their rights and freedoms and right to self-govern. Was probably back during the original attempt at the adoption of cap and trade under HB 2020 and 2007, which was the Clean Diesel Act. I went down there originally in, I believe it was June 12th, to talk to them about the concerns, because I did some projections on what would happen should that happen to the cost of diesel to these projects that I was putting together. Because at the time, when you have a lot of projects in queue, finding out how much it's going to alter the cost of everything just on the road aspect of the project itself, not to mention the backside of the delivery fees and all the things associated with it, I just started increasing the cost of diesel to my existing projects. And I was like, this is going to cause the cost of my projects to go up by 50% and then double and then triple.
Which
projects you're looking at for the Army Corps of Engineers that are put out on the US Fed BizOps page? I think it's sam.gov. They keep renaming it. These are public projects, and really just taking the existing bids that we were already working on and fluctuating the cost of the diesel fuel diesel fuel is the prime mover of every bit of equipment that is used to improve, build infrastructure, do any of the repair work. There's no plug-in versions of these equipments, which really just upstreams the problem in the first place. So, I became very concerned because it was one of the biggest ways that we were going to inflate the cost of these classical infrastructure projects. And Oregon has been lagging behind in the maintenance of its classical infrastructure. Our bridges, our roads, a lot of our other public works have been stuck in a time capsule since the 1970s, when really Oregon, for various reasons, lost the ability to focus on sustainable growth and almost developed a containment-minded paradigm of public administration. That's why we've noticed areas around, geographical areas that we compete with, the Port of Tacoma, the Port of Oakland, and that is, as port cities in a seaside area, our economy in every metric has grown slower than these other states. And it happens because of the rules adopted by the state in the name of the people. So the long and the short of it is I was there at the birth of Timber Unity. I talked to representatives. We talked to every representative in that capital, talked to every senator too.
So do you on this, just on the diesel stuff and on 2020, do you think climate change is a legitimate thing to be concerned about? And if so, what can we do about it, that doesn't have these deleterious effects on infrastructure?
And that's where I think we need to adopt a futurist mindset of it, because in a regard, we've come to agree that climate change is upon us. And we know from the geographical record that climate change, is itself responsible for 3 out of the 5 major extinction events on this planet. In a weird way, I don't acknowledge the climate change argument in the classical context, because the way I see it, it's a terraforming question. We have one political party in the Democrats who say we're terraforming wrong. And then you have the other side with the Republicans who are largely saying, oh, we can't terraform at all. What that indicates me from an engineering system standpoint is we need to get better at terraforming.
Meaning what? Like, what does that mean?
Terraforming is the alteration outside of what nature and the Malinowski cycles would like to see our climate do. The ability as a species that is hopefully progressing towards a type 1 civilization, at some point, the ability to alter up or down, that's what we're looking to do. At the end of the day, from a climate change standpoint, atmospheric carbon's at an all-time high. This is going to cause an increase in global temperature and the rise of sea level. Us wanting to stop that will require terraforming. We're going to fix this the same way the human species has fixed anything, through innovation and infrastructure and easing pathways to manage what we identify as an increasingly difficult problem. Politicizing issues to where we can't even have an honestly, technically accurate conversation about it is unproductive for everybody.
So what's an example of a terraforming thing you could do to deal with climate change?
All right. First, we have to look at how are we defining climate change. And with respect to the left, we'll define that, how they're defining it. And that is in a drastically increasing atmospheric CO2. Okay, well, there is one reliable way from a system standpoint to reduce atmospheric CO2. And that is cultivate and harvest the most effective photosynthesizers that you can. Because there is one proven way to get carbon dioxide out of the air. And that's with plants or other photosynthesizers that put them into themselves. So the only way we're going to fix climate change, if we're looking at it solely from a atmospheric carbon standpoint, is to do things that will take carbon out of the air.
What about
Electric
not,
cars
Drew?
are upstreaming where the electricity is coming from outside of, I'm a big fan of electric cars because I'm a performance car enthusiast, and watching a Tesla S Plaid smoke everything with an internal combustion engine gets my America pumping. The problem is, though, is we cannot simply switch to electrical cars and overburden an electrical system, once again, from an engineering and system standpoint that's stuck in the 1970s, to be able to charge everybody's electric car, and nor can we generate the electricity that's going to be necessary. We need something upstream that has the ability to provide more electron volts for less dollars to solve any of this. These are all infrastructure problems that we're talking about. Now, how do we reduce climate change if defined as too much atmospheric carbon? Well, we subsidize people who do things that sequester carbon. It's one of the prime arguments I made against HB 2020 and HB 2007. If your goal is to reduce climate, why don't you subsidize things that take carbon out of the air? All of these logging industries, all of these tree farms, all of these nurseries, these businesses sequester carbon for a living, and yet they don't get a carve out to your carbon plan. It's nonsensical from a systems engineering standpoint. I'm not a party politician. I'm a fairly autistic guy who looks at everything from the standpoint of the solutions backwards, and how our political language is keeping us from having conversations that will ever lead to an address of the fault tree errors that we're having. We're well beyond a root cause analysis on this, guys. I mean,
Yeah. Wait, what's a type 1 civilization? Quickly.
Okay.
Quickly. I know Nigel has a couple questions. I just have to know this. I never heard that term.
It's known as the Kardashev scale. The Kardashev scale is a scale of societal advancement that basically you have a type 1 Kardashev civilization that is able to sustainably use and reuse the resources available on its planet. A type 2 civilization would be one that was able to capture and utilize sustainably the resources available within its solar system. Type 3 being on a galactic scale, and then a type 4 civilization would be a transgalactic scale, or basically civilizations that have figured out that you can take energy out of time itself. It's mathematically possible. It just makes for overall less time. And there's some of us who actually know some of these equations who are contemplating if the speeding up of the galaxy, which is leading to the blue shifted shift that we're seeing in that these galaxies are spreading farther out, a viable solution is that there is a type 4 civilization that has figured out a way to extract energy from time at the expense of time.
Whoa.
So
Whoa.
heady,
All right,
nerdy,
I gotta reel this.
stuff.
Wait, Nigel's going to bring us back down to earth.
Okay, I think it's about
let's
time
come
we
back
did.
to your district. So,
No, but I like that.
So redistricting changed the makeup of District 31 considerably. It's much more. It was a pretty big Democratic advantage in the past decade. Now very even Republican and Democrats. You mentioned your work on cap and trade. I believe that Mike Peel, one of the founders of Timber Unity, has endorsed your opponent. So first of all, why? And secondly, which of the many endorsements that you have on your website, if you could only point to one, would you point to show voters in District 31 that you're the guy rather than your opponent?
Wow, that's okay. I'll take those one at a time.
Sure.
Yes, redistricting has drastically redrawn the lines around Columbia County, but when you look at it not just as a timestamp of the beginning of this decade and the end of the decade, there has been a shift in areas that could be better classified as rural or suburban Oregon that have been not shifting left as fast as other parts of the state have, from a rote, overly generalized to the point of obscenity, because we do overgeneralize to the point of obscenity. You guys can't agree with that, right? We divide
Sure.
ourselves up into
yeah.
convenient little groups that can get
Yep.
set against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, pawns have more in common on either side of the line than any of them do with the royals marching them down the road. Yes, the 31st House District was redrawn to be even redder than it was already growing. But it was already well along that line. Columbia County, for example, by itself shifted to a red county in the 2020 elections and had been shifting that way through 2016 and 2018. And I think it has a lot to do with the increased polarity of politics that we've experienced fairly nationwide since then, but especially after redistricting. We lost out of our District 31 here, the area of House District 31 that used to be between the St. John's Bridge now to the tip of Salvie Island is now ceded to a different district. So we lost a great kind of area of Portland, which could be considered more contemporary, blue as far as our oversimplified political view of things tends to be. We also lost areas of Hillsborough and areas that could be classified as purplish. We lost Forest Grove, Cornelius, we lost Claxonite proper, and in the number shuffling of that, the areas we picked up were massive extensions of Western Washington County that are firmly rural. So it was already trending red, but I have to wholly agree, but it was redrawn even redder than that with the redistricting. I'm not sure what their motivations were. It's just a state of that's the way it is. We're now firmly the reddest district west of the Willamette, and we're now, oddly enough, looking at a +6 red district that crosses the Multnomah County line and is, radiating a change that's probably going to extend to the doorstep of downtown Portland. And that just is what it is. What that means or how people are going to feel about that, it's going to largely be based on what everybody brings to the table moving forward.
Did you get to the timber unity question? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry I asked you such a long and wound up.
No,
question.
I was getting ready to go on to that one.
Right.
I'm not sure why. I can't speak to other people's motivations. I can say that as far as timber unity goes, I've been fighting a parallel cause to them since the first day that they were. If you look back on my social media on June 12th, 2019, one of the the first time that Timber Unity and the group that Jeff Levy had put together specifically to push back against HB 2020 and 2007 as a small contingent before any of the rallies that changed the face of conservative activism in Oregon. It was 22 of them, I think 12 or 13 trucks, and one very discontented project planner, cost estimator, who had been down there for 2 days already trying to talk to representatives. I ended up shooting a video of them driving around the Capitol. That video went viral, and largely it was around that time that Timber Unity took off and became advanced. If you go onto the Timber Unity website, you'll see me on there behind Kim Thatcher and standing next to Dennis Linthicum, because that's who I was talking to when we walked down the stairs. You'll see me arguing in session and giving testimony against these bills, not Brian Stout. I think we can understand the effect that the political consultancy class has had in what we'll just say astroturfing good grassroots organizations. And while questioning why that happens is, intellectually, redundant, because power, that's why people do anything, because power. I've been there fighting with Timber Unity since I ever saw Mike Peel down there, and I've never seen Brian Stout down there. So what motivates groups to do things, I'm not sure. But I can say that when it comes to looking for the fight record between myself and Brian Stout, and who stood against them as far as 2019, and who's the one that testified against 8 bills this go round, and which candidate furnished a list of all the bills, the sponsors, the co-sponsors, the in the interests of, and the data to all the activist groups that have been active and who didn't. Well, that's me.
Yeah.
So who's able to use their connections through the political consulting class, and who's actually been there fighting with the grassroots? We have that. That's the classical Oregon political divide, isn't it? It's not really Republican or Democrat, left or right. It's establishment versus genuinely unsatisfied with the status quo. And I think those are better political lines to draw us up by.
Does that answer
Much
your question, Nigel?
Yeah, it does. And so, Drew, who of the endorsements you have gotten, if you were to point to one that you would want people watching this video to think about as a reflection of who you are as a candidate and who you might be as a legislator, which endorsement would you point to?
The one from Camden Leda, the one from my wife, because none of the others would have even been possible to consider, conceive, or even advance towards pursuing without my wife telling me, not only can you do this, you have a duty to do this. First job I ever had, as I said, I grew up loving the water. I was a competitive swimmer. My 2 sports were wrestling and swimming. Obviously, one of the first jobs that you end up getting is usually associated with your interests growing up. One of my first jobs was lifeguard. And one of the lessons I learned as a lifeguard is how dangerous a drowning person is. You're going to catch elbows in your face. You're going to have, anybody ever tried to give a cat a bath and the cat didn't want any of it? Well, imagine 180 pounds of wet cat. That's what it's like rescuing somebody. At the point of panic, a drowning person is bereft of reason. So you're going to catch these elbows, and it's nothing personal from them. This is panic inducing a lot of it. And I think my wife understands that in the same way that I do. We didn't enter into any of this stuff unaware of how it can get in politics sometimes and how easy you are to be demonized. My wife's endorsement definitely meant the most to me because it was her support and tasking of duty, saying, if nobody better than you is going to step up and be these people's lifeguard, you have to at least try. And that's largely all it's been since. Is I've never suffered from addiction as one of my issues, but I cannot argue the effect of 12-step programs and the ability to accept the things we cannot change, and the strength to know the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. One way or the other, Oregon's in a state where it needs recovery, it needs healing, it needs that more than ever.
Yeah. Hey, we're just running out of time a little bit here. We are out of time. Can I ask a couple of quick yes or no's? And then we have our bonus question.
Okay.
Coming back to HB 2020 and would you, if you were in the House or the Senate then, would you have walked out to protest to stop that from becoming law?
This is one of my favorite questions because it does come up a lot. And we've watched over the years in politics, not only in our state, but in others. Why?
So it's got to keep it short. It was a yes or no. I'll let you have a.
You asked a question, I have to qualify. I would never walk out and to push an agenda. But if all I had in my quiver to protect my people's rights inalienable rights, and the only arrow in my quiver is denial of quorum, ethics would demand that I act in defense of my people's rights, their lives, their liberty, their property, and their prosperity above all causes, and to bear full faith and allegiance to the Constitution. So I could not, and that once again, it becomes a judgment call as a representative. Is this an agenda that's being pushed? Because I can guarantee you, if the Republicans tried to come out with something and we were, I don't know, thought experiment, the red wave goes better than everybody anticipates, and now the Democrats are in a super majority. If I had to walk out to protect the rights of my Democratic constituency, I've seen examples of left police states and right police states. I'm common sense down the middle. I'm an advocate for my people's rights, their lives, their liberties, their property, and their prosperity. Past that, I'm not an agenda pusher.
Okay.
So
two last ones. Here's another. This is really a yes or no.
Okay.
Do you think Joe Biden won the last election fair and square? Yes or no?
I think that the second most democratic thing a society could ever do is audit an election, with the first most democratic thing they could ever do is have the election in the first place. I do believe if there was issue with it, or either which way, the way to silence concern from the people on the right was to be like, fine, this was the fairest election in the history of Everland, and we'll show you the receipts. Here's all the receipts. The two sides became headlocked in this issue was,
all right,
the process has to be protected.
All right.
People's confidence of the process has to be protected. And neither side, it seemed, operated in the best of faith necessary to assuage the concerns of people. Once again, to the people goes my concern, not to red team or blue team.
Okay.
I think that toxic bullcrap is destroying our state.
Yeah. All right. Here's an easy one. Here's an easy one. This is the fun one.
Okay.
So the pandemic seems to be abating. Knock on wood. The numbers are up a little, but we've all had moments where it felt like it was over for us, right? Like it was a moment of joy. Where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm out here, with a bunch of people in a room, doing whatever. Was there a moment for you that was just like, oh my God, this thing is lifting. It's going to get better?
Yes.
Go ahead.
It was the moment the lockdown started, and I decided I was not participating. And I didn't wear a mask. It was that moment when I decided that I'm not going to allow the edicts of a public administrator to carry the simulated gravity of fully ratified legislation. I decided that I was going to engage in lawful civil disobedience. So, yeah, from the get-go. From the beginning, I knew they were never going to have me in that mask. From the beginning, I knew they were never going to have me take place in that experiment. And from the beginning, I knew that it was never a pandemic. Remember, this was an outbreak. This escaped a laboratory. At some level, COVID existed because someone made it so on purpose.
Lab leak. Have you been COVID free the whole time?
No, I actually think I got it within the first week or so. And anytime I felt like I had the sniffles or anything like that, I isolated. I didn't put myself out there, because I do believe it's your responsibility when you are confirmed as possibly contagious, even if it's just the common cold, for crying out loud, or the flu or anything, pink eye. I'm not going to put it hazard the people around me. Okay. No, I wasn't.
That's a good one. Nigel, we good?
Yeah, I think we're out of time. Drew, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a ton.
Real quick, before people go and call me an anti-vaxxer, remember, I was an international commercial diver. I worked the West Coast of Africa, Latin America, South America, and I've gotten panels for all of the above. I've served in the Mediterranean and the Baltic during my time in the Navy. I've had more vaccinations than any 10 of you.
So did you get vaccinated against COVID-19?
I'm sorry, that's none of your business. I don't ask you medical questions. I would respect you to refrain from doing that.
You just told us about all the vaccinations you got. So I mean, you volunteered
I
that
gotcha.
information.
Well, there's see that's where the exchange of information becomes essential to maintain on a line item basis.
Okay.
Because if not, you tell people one thing, then everything becomes your business. I mean, if I was to ask you your vaccination status,
I'd be happy to.
And
I'd
then
be
on,
happy to
then
tell
on
you.
the top of that, what's next? Your latest STD panel, any other things that might be able to be used as a means of depriving you your Title VII rights to reasonable accommodation. No, I will always err on the people's rights, and I'll always err to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and bear full faith and allegiance to that. I'm not a party guy. I'm a people person.
I like it. That's a great way to end.
All right, Drew. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Be well. Take
Thank you
care.
all. You guys are the fourth estate. Do us proud.
All right. Thank you.
Get Rock Point.